Welcome to our Lunchtime Live program on WJEJ, a partnership with Washington County Public Schools, the third Thursday of the month at this time. This is Will Kaufman, joined today by Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Clayton Wilcox. Today's show is sponsored by the Columbia Bank here in Hagerstown and in Washington County. Sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here again.
And see you later.
Thank you very much, Dad.
Thank you.
He's out of here.
I wouldn't go quite that far. I'll be here till the 13th of March for sure.
Right. Finally reached the timeline on that. Well, tell me about the adjustment. You know, doing here, wrapping up however many loose ends there are here, and you know, phasing in down in Charlotte. How does that work for you?
Well, right now, not that well. No,
Yeah, right.
you know, it's great. We have a great team here, so a lot of people are picking up pieces right now. I'm working really hard on getting the budget done, working with senior staff, making sure that we can make a great recommendation to the board. We're trying to finalize with the state our revenue picture so that we can then define our expenses. I think that we're going to be in a pretty good place with the budget. The interesting thing will be the effect of negotiations that kind of take place after we get the budget set, which is really kind of an odd way to go about it. But if you're going to negotiate, you can't really put in the budget exactly what you're going to offer your employees, because otherwise it's no longer a negotiation; it's a telling, and then you've got a prohibitive practice. So, in terms of instruction, I'm working with Dr. Pugh. We're making sure that our principals are getting the proper in-service to help with their schools and faculties during the course of spring. And then there's just a lot of making sure that the team that you've left behind kind of still, grips the vision and is trying to move forward with that. But also you walk that fine line because you know that a new leader's coming. They're going to want to put their own stamp on it. And so it's a funny thing to do when you leave a district. On the other side of it, I'm trying to learn more about Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools in my free time. I've traveled down there a couple of times on vacation time. I will likely visit again once or twice more by using some vacation or some leave time. We'll see how that goes.
What is your stamp here? Is the stamp when superintendents come and go? Is there truly a stamp, or can when somebody looks back at this, oh, those were the Wilcox years? What is there to that?
Well, I think there's a lot to that. I mean, I still run into people who talk about, well, Betty Morgan did that,
right,
or someone else did that. Wayne Gersten did that, and that was a long time ago. But I think, if you're doing the right things, they stand the test of time. I think oftentimes what gets superintendents in trouble is when they kind of pick up on the fad of the month and they're always trying to grab something. I hope what a hallmark of mine will be is that we help to kind of transform the curriculum around standards-based education. I'm not going to say that we moved to the Common Core, because we really didn't do that. What we did is we said, what's important for our kids to learn, and we've built a curriculum around that. We've really tried hard to make sure that our kids not only know something, but can do something with what they know. We've really tried to embrace technology in a meaningful way across the system, not because technology is cool or faddish. It is those things, but it's so much more. It gives kids a window to their future. It lets them look at how they're going to interact in the world of work. I mean, there's no job today, really, that doesn't use technology in some form. You think about this radio station, lots of technology all around us, and yet it's kind of an analog or an AM signal. You take a look at just up the street at the repair shops. All those people use diagnostic technologies that are computer-based. So we want to give our kids that kind of experience. When you go off to college or university, most of your classes now are going to require that you use technology in the class to successfully complete. So again, I think the legacy, if you will, is going to be that we have really moved towards a standards-based curriculum, that we've infused a lot of technology, and I hope that we've kind of embraced a spirit of innovation and people will kind of keep taking that next logical step.
I don't know if this county reflects universally school districts around the country where there's a sort of a hesitant culture in the community. I'm sure you found that early on, where maybe support wasn't just magnificent for the school system and for public education. Is that universal, or was there something here that's more of a challenge in that regard to sort of change the culture in the community?
Well, I think, one of the things that has the answer is yes. Well, I think that this community has been a little harder than I would have anticipated, or I think that most people who are coming from somewhere else would find. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think what it is that when you really start to think about Hagerstown, Washington County, a lot of the folks who have been here and been successful here have long, deep roots. And so understanding why you might change has been a little more difficult for some of those folks. So again, I think that we've done a lot to kind of change some of that in terms of the public school system, but we still run into people who say, well, why would you do it? That didn't work for me. Or this is how I did it and I had a great life. And I think that might be a little more pronounced here. And again, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes it's good to be skeptical of the new and make people prove it to you. But at some point, you have to realize the world's changing around you. And if you don't choose to change, you're not going to be able to compete with some of the faster movers, the quicker adopters.
What hasn't worked in your time here?
I think one of the things that has been particularly troubling for me, yet we have a lot of good people who are working on this, has been moving kids who are identified as having special needs from being identified as special needs to being in our traditional regular programs. We've just not been able to really move the bar for some of our kids in spite of our best efforts. That's been particularly troubling to me. I think, we also have some pockets where people don't want to be as transparent and open as they perhaps should be. We've had a few Freedom of Information requests. They've taken us too long to release the results from. I think, this community, the citizens who support us, deserve to know the answers to their questions. I'm not talking about the frivolous questions, but I am talking about the larger questions around our expenses and how we react to things. I think we could have been better in that, and I have to shoulder that responsibility because I'm the superintendent of schools, and those Freedom of Information requests come into our public service office, but it ultimately is my responsibility to move those out, and we probably haven't done that as well as we could have.
Just from my corner, you don't seem like a polarizing figure, and yet they're on one end of the spectrum when you announced and the buzz started about you leaving for Charlotte. Celebrations on one end, good riddance, Wilcox, and on the other end, people were weeping. Don't leave us. They're tugging on your pants legs. What does that mean to you? That you've, to me, it means you stuck to your guns, and whether somebody didn't like your direction or they really enjoyed working with you or watching you work.
Well, this will be kind of the coward's way out. I don't know what it means. I know that every morning I get up, I have to be true to myself. I have to do what I think is the right thing to do. That's why the Board of Education selected me, is because they thought I had a vision for the future. I think if you talk to most of our kids, I think if you talk to the parents of kids, people who have kids in our school system, they'll say our schools are better today than they were last year or the year before or 5 years ago. So, I'm proud of what we've done. I think we've done a lot of really, really good things. At the same time, I know there are people out there who have a different view of public education in general and education here in Washington County. It maybe didn't treat them well, or they didn't think we reacted well to, some of the needs that their kids had. I understand that. I get that. But again, I don't think I would have changed too many things as I went along the way, because quite frankly, I think we are in a much better place today. We have if I had to recount things, I could say, we've opened 2 beautiful new schools. We've opened several new programs. We've moved our administrative offices to spaces that are worthy of our folks. We've completely reinvented our curriculum. We have looked at our funding formulas. We have brought new resources to the community to support our kids and their education. We've reduced the amount of testing, yet our results are improving across almost every metric. Beyond that, we've introduced a technology plan that's been great for kids. We have 20,000 connected devices with very few service drops. We have given our employees compensation increases 5 times in the last 5 years, actually 6 times in the last 5 years, because we made up a year when it wasn't given. So I'm pretty proud of that. We've held our insurance costs back. We're self-insured. People don't realize that until just recently. And I think anybody who's watching the insurance market knows what's happening there. So we couldn't keep holding back. But I'm very proud of what we've done.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking with Superintendent of Washington County Schools, Dr. Clayton Wilcox. This is Lunchtime Live on WJEJ. We're here the third Thursday of the month. And this month's show is sponsored by the Columbia Bank, the Hagerstown Trust Division. What did you learn as a superintendent, as an administrator, as a boss in your time here? How much better are you? What insights do you have now that you didn't have? What did you learn in your time here?
Well, a number of things. I think the first thing that I learned is patience. I'm somebody who kind of has a bit of pants on fire kind of thing, and that sense of urgency is pretty strong with me. But being here in Hagerstown, where people tend to embrace change slowly, like we talked about in the last 15-minute segment. I think I've learned patience. I think I've learned a lot more about widespread implementation. Moving to the digital learning plan where all of our kids have advice was an arduous task because it forced us to really go back and detail plan every single step and kind of pre-plan conversations that we're going to have people, anticipating what they might say in objection or in support so that we could kind of fill out that record. So it probably made me be a little more attentive to detail than perhaps I was in the last couple of positions that I've held. Beyond that, I think, being a school superintendent is something that, people who know me well would probably say, well, wait a minute, you're not the most humble guy, but I think I am probably a little more humble having had this position than I had before because, for every positive thing, there's something that kind of pulls you on the other side, keeps you awake. I mean, just last evening, we had a young girl who was killed in an accident, which was a tragedy. But, you think then, what could you have done different as a school superintendent to have better safeguarded that young girl? Now, we really had no control of that. She had been home from the day. She'd already visited a friend's house and went out playing. But you think, did we not do enough around traffic safety? Did we not do enough around, talking to kids about darting in between cars? So, being a school superintendent, it's not just about the highs. There's a lot of lows, and I think those things keep you humble.
Can you maintain the people part of it in a much bigger district in Charlotte? Does it take the interpersonal part of it away to a greater degree?
Well, I think people have about the same capacity for having and managing relationships. So I'm sure I'm going to have some, but I will tell you, I know that I will be a lot more isolated visiting. Here we have 48 schools. I can visit those schools several times a year. In Charlotte, there are almost 200 schools. Here I have 48 principals. There I'll have 200 principals. We have 19,000 employees in Charlotte. Here we have about 3,000. And quite honestly, today, I can go by most schools and I know, a significant number of people on those campuses by name. I know something about their kids and families. I think I'm going to know something like that, but it's going to be farther and, apart in Charlotte. So I think you can have the relationships, but not to the extent where, everybody knows you.
Is the structure similar there, other than from a size standpoint? Elected school board? What's the structure?
There we have 3 board members that are elected county-wide, Mecklenburg County, and then 6 that are from districts. So there are 9 board members. It is very similar in terms of the board meets. Instead of the first and third Tuesday, they meet the second and fourth Tuesday with committees in between. So governance is pretty much the same.
Well, that'll be good because then you can watch our board meetings.
I plan to do
every
that
other week
and call in too. I actually am keeping my third Thursday free too, so I can call in this show.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not how I would have done it.
And then from your standpoint, what's your team look like down there?
There are 11 direct reports. I have 5 area superintendents beyond that. So the county's kind of broken up into regions. There are probably 600 or 700 county level administrative people. My office is actually in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Government Center, which is uptown, which is their downtown, or our downtown. It's their uptown. And then we have offices in an auxiliary facility where there are probably the balance of that, several hundred people, 600-800 people work.
Accommodations for you? House, all of those kinds, or is that you're still, that's still in the works?
Well, the good news is that both of my kids, my daughter's at Virginia Tech, so she's not looking to come back home because she is going to probably do an internship next summer, and so she doesn't have the need to have a place to locate. My son is moved to Baltimore now. He has an apartment downtown there. My wife Julie and I are just kind of saying, well, you know what, we want to try maybe something different. We've thought about maybe living in, one of the high rises in Uptown. We've thought about trying to live somewhere out near Lake Norman. We just don't really know. The good news
Some
for
of
us
us need to have the Super 8 as one of the options.
Well,
like for the first half of the year till you get adjusted.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of why we're thinking about maybe living downtown or uptown, is because then we don't have to go through that search in a rush and, buy a house. Because ultimately, I think, everybody wants to own a home, or at least be somewhere where they can kind of get away from the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day work. So we're excited. We've sold our home here already, and the people that bought the home have been gracious enough to allow us to stay till the end of March, and my contract ends the 13th. So all that should work out great.
What are you walking into down there? Things to fix immediately? Minor tune-up needed? What do you face when you're walking in?
Well, one of the things among superintendents, I think Charlotte is thought of as one of the premier school districts in the country. It is the 18th largest district in the country, with 160,000 kids, and as I mentioned before, 19,000 employees. But it is a Broad Award-winning school district several years ago, which is kind of a national prize for excellence. It's a great school district, but they're struggling with a number of issues. One of the issues that they're struggling with right now is student assignment, because they're trying to find a way to make sure that there aren't have schools and have not schools, and that's tough because of the way people choose to live. Oftentimes people with fewer resources congregate in an area because that's their only option for them, and then the wealthy tend to move out and kind of go into these enclaves of folks. And what the school system is trying to do is kind of find a way to bring rich, poor, black, white, brown together in environments where everybody can be successful. There are some, if you follow social media there, they talk about you can't socially engineer that way. There are others who say, but you should try. And so, I'm walking into that discussion, that debate. I think the board has been very clear. They want to go down this path of creating more diverse environments along a number of lines. So I'm going to help with that. And then they have the other issues that large school systems have, which is disproportionate achievement levels. Typically in big city school systems, much like we have here in Hagerstown, our African-American kids, our Latino kids don't perform to the same high standard that a lot of our white kids do. What's creating that gap, and, trying to wrestle with that? I'm sure everybody who's listening has an opinion on what's creating that, but I would just say this: it's a complicated mix. It's not a simple answer. There's not a silver bullet that you shoot at this. It's not that there's a bad parent. I mean, there are bad parents, but it's not that simple. And so that's what I'm going to be wrestling with. And then just trying to, as you pointed out earlier, trying to develop the kind of relationships that allow you to move the organization.
What are the demographics of that district?
I think right now about 40% of the kids are African-American, black kids. 30% of the school district is Latino, about 20% white, and then you have a mix of Asian and other cultures beyond that. So it's a very diverse school district today. One of the challenges that I think they're facing in North Carolina, and again in a number of states, is the number of kids who have resources, whether they are white, black, brown, leaving the public school system and going into private academies, charter schools, and such. And that's taking place in Charlotte to a significant degree right now.
Is the district known for anything, for special programs, for special initiatives? Or are they ahead of the game in any particular arena?
I think they're known nationally for magnet programs, charter schools, their acceptance of charters, and I think just delivering a great curriculum. They have been one of the most progressive school districts in the country in terms of supporting their teachers and making sure their teachers are really well prepared to be in the classroom. So, that's something I think that they can be proud of.
Good afternoon. You're on the air with Dr. Wilcox.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think he's done, or Dr. Wilcox, you've done a wonderful job, and you will be missed as you go, but I do think you've been an asset to the Washington County Board of Education and our schools.
Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much for calling.
All right, thank you. Bye.
In all the time we've done this, we've only had a couple of calls. That was
well,
nice.
We don't seek them out because between
yeah.
the two of us, we generally have enough to talk about.
Well, yeah.
when you're full time down there, what's the adjustment? What's the adjustment on the day to day? I mean, the actual day to day administration. What's the first half a dozen tasks?
Well, I think for me, first of all, when you're a superintendent, your day kind of fills to the district. So, my days here start 6:30, 7 o'clock, usually at the latest. They end around 6. I don't think my day is going to change a whole lot there. Maybe more night activities there just because of the scope of the system. But in terms of kind of day-to-day jobs, first thing I've got to do is make sure the staff is set up in the way. And the current superintendent, Ann Clark, is helping with that right now. She's looking at her appointment schedule and other things. So I think we'll have that set up fairly quickly. Getting that done is important. Then making sure that the approved budget actually supports the initiatives of the board. That's something that's going to be an important piece. And then, as I said earlier, working on the student assignment piece. Though we'll have completed phase 1, we'll be implementing phase 2 of it, and executing that plan that's been developed by others is going to probably be the third big thing.
Good afternoon. You're on with Dr. Wilcox.
Yes, sir. I'd like to know how you explain the fact that the United States spends more money on education than any other country in the world. And you know where we stand with the intelligence of our kids.
Okay. Well, I'll have Dr. Wilcox address it. Thanks for your call. So we put resources toward education.
Well, we do. I think one of the things that people have to understand, and I'm not one to make excuses, but the United States is probably one of the only countries in the world where everybody gets to go to school, that we don't begin to sort and select. I know that's not necessarily true of Finland, which a lot of people talk about as kind of that premier education system. But if you're a student today in China, if you're a student today in India, and you're not the right student, you're not going to go to school there. If you're a child with a handicapping condition, you're not going to go to school. And what a lot of people don't understand is that we're funded on an average funding form. Most kids in this district are worth. If you want to be mercenary, they're about $11,000. Right. Okay, so let's see, how do we spend that $11,000? In this district, 85% of every dollar that we receive goes to support our employees in the terms of either salaries or benefits. But what people have to understand is some of our kids with special needs cost us $20,000, $25,000 to educate a year because they require not only full-time teachers, but paraprofessionals, medical support. Some of our kids have full-time nurses that attend. Those kids would not be going to school in other systems. Now, does that account for all the spending? No. Is there wasteful spending? Yeah, there's wasteful spending. But, there's wasteful spending in almost every household in this community. Again, I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm simply trying to say that it's a difficult set of scenarios, and oftentimes people who are critical, and I'm not saying this gentleman was, of our spending, I'm simply saying, they remember a very different day when school was great for them. But, were all the kids going to school in those days? I don't think so. And we've talked on this program before that, if people graduated in the 50s, they could have looked to the right and to the left, and one of the people wouldn't have been there because only about 50% of the population actually graduated from high school in the 50s. Today, we're graduating 93% of our kids. That means a significant number of kids are going to school today that wouldn't have gone in the past. And you can, and people need to understand that the graduation rate has across the country has roughly tracked the decades until the mid-70s, where it kind of leveled out at about 75-80%. So,
what's the budget like down there?
The budget is $1.6 billion.
I'm sorry, that's with a
B. $1.6 billion. Here we're about $300 million. So it's a significantly larger budget, but significantly more kids. There, the per pupil allocation is just slightly under $8,000 per kid. So we'll try to do more with less. But once you get big resources like that, it's a lot easier to manipulate, move dollars around, and do things for your community. Do
you have a sense of state support of education in North Carolina?
Probably not as strong as here in Maryland. But, at the heart of the last question we had, I think somebody says, we're overfunded here. Well, I don't think we are. But I think the folks in North Carolina would say the state really hasn't upheld its end of the bargain in terms of supporting local school districts. Charlotte County, because of the growth of industry, particularly around insurance and banking, has been a fairly wealthy area and has done pretty well. But I think most of the folks who, I used to call them charlatans, and I found out they're not charlatans, they're charlatans. Most of the charlatans would say that they're not getting getting the support that they need because they're supporting education locally.
Although Charlatans has kind of an edgy ring to it.
Yeah, but
They may not be proud of that. Though.
Well, and they also said, "You're not from here, are you?"
yeah, exactly. Do you have you've developed, and you developed them very quickly, strong partnerships here in government, in business, and industry? I'm assuming the same approach down there.
I hope so. One of the first things I want to do is reach out to some of the large financial. In fact, what's interesting is I've had 3 meetings there. One with some leadership from the African American kind of community, because they're most directly affected in many ways by the reassignment plan and the assignment plan. But beyond that, I've met with the Chamber of Commerce and a downtown Rotary group that had a lot of the business leaders and movers and shakers. And of course, the Chamber of Commerce was really an important meeting. So, yeah, absolutely, building partnerships. I met some folks from Bank of America. I'm sure I'm going to meet other of the large kind of Fortune 100 companies that are there, trying to build internships for our kids, opportunities for their kind of intellectual capital to really help us as a school system get better.
Have you been in schools down there?
I actually have. The first time I went down to visit, I spent time. I went to 2 different schools. I went to one of the magnet elementary schools. Spent a good portion of an afternoon there. I also visited a high school that had almost 3,000 kids in it, and spent some time going from class to class, talking to kids and talking to teachers.
And what did you learn? I mean, first impressions?
First impressions, really strong faculty and staff. Kids that were going to school that didn't look much like each other, but were going to school, in kind of a neat, harmonious way. I was pleased with what I saw.
Is it a transient demographic down there, or are there generations of kids coming from families who have been entrenched in that area?
Well, I think there are a lot of folks who have been there, much like most school districts. I mean, some time ago I read a statistic that said in any community about 70% of your residents are lifelong residents. Their families have been there. I think that demographic probably plays out pretty well. But what makes Charlotte unique is it's growing about 2,000 kids a year. So that means, if you look at like our pupil generation numbers, that means that there are 8,000 to 10,000 new people coming to the Charlotte area every year. So I think it's a growing population.
You may be building schools down there.
We are
right off the bat.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the first things that I will be doing in terms of school finance is they're going to the Mecklenburg Consul to ask approval for a bond issue that will be offered at about $890 million to build new schools, to renovate facilities, and to do the kinds of things that it takes to address that population increase.
Your relationship with the elected board here, let's say, has been challenging at times. Do you have any sense of what you're getting in North Carolina?
No.
Okay.
No, and that's I shouldn't do that. The board there that hired me voted, I think of the 9 members, there were 7 in the room that day. One was ill, and another had a fall during the ice storm and had to have stitches, so wasn't there. But they voted unanimously to bring me to the district. I think it's a great board. I think there are some issues that they have around the implementation of the student assignment plan. It will be my responsibility to kind of help find that middle ground. But people feel passionately about it because it does affect the children and the constituents that put them in office. So we'll just have to figure that out. With regards to this board here, I've been pleased for the most part. I mean, obviously we have a couple of challenging situations. But I think, any more in modern politics, you're just going to have that. I'm hopeful that this board in Washington County will find their pace and find their way. I think, them having the opportunity to hire their own superintendent now, because the board that hired me really has changed, is probably a good thing. So I think all of us working together, we can make this transition work well.
So there will be ice in North Carolina. There will be weather calls and decisions.
Yeah, the good news is I don't have to make them anymore. Other people make them. Here it was getting a call.
So nobody at the end of the process is say, "Okay, Clayton, what do you think?"
Well, I think it's Clayton's responsibility, but nobody is going to say, "Clayton, what do you think?" They're going to make the call, and then I've just got to react to it. Yeah, which is a good thing.
Give me the highlights of your stay in Washington County.
The highlights for me would be the people I've met. I will tell you, I've been blessed here. First of all, 5.5 years ago, I was welcomed to the community by so many people. And all of those people have really stood by. I mean, there have been a few boo birds. I get that. I think that goes with if you do something, if you accomplish something, there are people who don't like what you did. But, from wonderful community leaders like Mary Bicon at the library to, the mayors of Hagerstown. Both mayors have been great to me, to the Sons organization. Going to baseball games has been fun. The radio station here with Phil and, the morning jock, I'm not going to mention his name because you can see him at Facebook. Lou has been terrific. The community has just been great to me and to my wife. We've been invited to so many things from, Girls Inc. Events to HEAL events. I'm on the symphony board. I'm on the Fine Arts Museum board. It has been terrific to be here. Just a lot of really good people. And I honestly think that one of the things that this community should do is take stock of all the good things it has. Because if you're an outsider and you come here, it is a great place to be. But sometimes we run ourselves down so much because of our familiarity. But I will tell you that there are very few communities that are this warm, this embracing to an outsider. So that's what I'd say.
Well, to say the least, from my individual corner and from the radio station's corner, it's been a pleasure to have you do the show. I know the juices flow when you and I have a chance to do this half hour. We appreciate folks calling in and expressing interest and feedback on the show. So good luck in North Carolina. I'll see you around the office for at least a little while yet.
Yeah.
And I thank you very much for doing the show today and in these past years while you've been here. I appreciate it.
And I want to say thank you to you, Will. The great job that you do in public information for us. Hosting this show is but one small aspect of what you do. But I also want to say thanks to the team here at the radio station. In all sincerity, they've given us a chance to say great things about the public school system, to get timely information out. Everything from, Lunchtime Live to just the daily calendars to what's going on in the schools. All those things have meant a lot to our success. So I want to say thank you to everybody out there as well.
Dr. Clayton Wilcox, my guest on Lunchtime Live. We're heard the third Thursday of the month at this time on WJEJ. Our show today has been sponsored by the Columbia Bank, Hagerstown Trust Division. We will see you in February.